I still remember the sound the room made when the truth finally landed. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a soft ripple of silence moving across the wedding reception as my stepdaughter stared at the folder sitting on the gift table and realized everyone around her was starting to understand what she'd done. Her lipstick smile cracked first. And that was the exact moment she understood I had done exactly what she asked. I had disappeared. Just not the way she expected. But that part of the story happened later that evening. The real beginning was the night before. The kitchen light in our house in Carmel had been buzzing for months, a faint electrical hum that sat in the background of everything like a mosquito you couldn't quite swat. I kept meaning to replace the bulb. But that evening I was too busy finishing the last wedding favors. It was about 9:40 p.m., and the kitchen table looked like a craft store had exploded. Ribbon, gift tags, little white bags of chocolate-covered almonds Ashley insisted on ordering from some boutique candy shop in Chicago. I was tying the final ribbon when Ashley walked in. She was still wearing her rehearsal dinner dress, dark blue silk, the kind of thing you only wear once and never again. Her heels clicked across the tile. Upstairs I could hear Tom in the shower. Ashley poured herself a glass of water without looking at me. "You still working on those?" she said. "Last bag," I told her. She leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. For a moment neither of us said anything. I thought maybe she was going to thank me. "I should have known better," she sighed. "Tomorrow's going to be a lot," she said. "The photographer already moved the timeline twice, and Evan's mom is freaking out about the seating chart." I nodded. "That's weddings," I said. "Something always—" She cut me off. "Diane, can we just be honest for a second?" Something in her tone made my hands stop moving. I looked up. Ashley set the glass down and crossed her arms. "Tomorrow is about family." I waited. She met my eyes. And then she said the sentence that ended 12 years. "The best gift you could give me is disappearing from this family." For a second I honestly thought I had misheard her. The ribbon slipped through my fingers and fell onto the table. What I said quietly. She didn't soften it. "Look," she said like she was explaining something obvious. "You've been helpful. I'll give you that. But tomorrow is about real family." The word real hung in the air. I felt the buzzing kitchen light above us suddenly louder. "I'm your father's wife," I said. "Exactly." She shrugged. "You married Dad after Mom left. You were a great placeholder. But tomorrow isn't about placeholders." The word landed harder than anything else. "Placeholder?" I didn't say anything. She kept going. "You don't have to make a scene or anything, just don't show up. Take the day for yourself." I stared at her. "Ashley." She grabbed her phone again. "You've always been good at staying out of the way. Just do that one more time." And then she picked up her glass and walked out of the kitchen. Her heels clicked down the hallway. A second later, the bedroom door upstairs opened and Tom's voice floated down. "Ashley, you home?" "Yeah, Dad," she called back, just grabbing some water. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just erased 12 years of my life with one sentence. I stayed at the table. The ribbon was still in my hand. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe an hour. Eventually, the house went quiet. Ashley went upstairs. Tom started snoring. The kitchen clock ticked past midnight. I looked down at the table. The wedding binder was sitting next to the favor bags. 3 inches thick. Vendor contacts, payment confirmations, seating charts, backup schedules, emergency numbers. Every detail of that wedding lived in that binder. Because I had built it. Not Ashley. Not Tom. Me. I leaned back in the chair and rubbed my eyes. 12 years. That's how long I had been in that house. I met Tom when I was 40. He was a contractor then running jobs around Indianapolis. Decent man, quiet, the kind of guy who'd rather fix a broken sink than argue about feelings. Ashley was 17 when we married. Angry, hurt, suspicious of anyone who wasn't her mother. I never tried to replace Lori. That was never the goal. Lori lived in Dayton and drifted in and out of Ashley's life like a seasonal storm. When Ashley needed someone to co-sign a lease her sophomore year of community college, Lori wasn't around. I was. When Ashley ran up $8,000 in credit card debt at 22 because she thought minimum payments meant optional, Lori didn't answer the phone. I sat at the dining table for 3 nights helping her build a repayment plan. When Tom's business had a slow winter and the furnace died the same week Ashley needed a deposit for her first apartment, I covered the deposit. Quietly. Because that's what families do. Or at least that's what I thought families did. I flipped open the wedding binder. Page after page of spreadsheets stared back at me. Florist balance. Transportation deposit. Liquor upgrade Ashley insisted on after tasting the premium package at the country club. Most of those lines had little notes beside them. Paid. Confirmed. Handled. My handwriting. I closed the binder slowly. Ashley's voice replayed in my head. You were a great placeholder. I stood up and poured myself a cup of the coffee that had been sitting in the pot all evening. It tasted burnt. I didn't care. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened the laptop. Not the family computer. My own. The one I used for bookkeeping clients. The screen lit up the dark kitchen. For the next 4 hours I worked. I printed payment records. Vendor emails. Credit card statements. Everything connected to that wedding. Everything connected to the household finances I had been quietly managing for years. Around 5:15 a.m., the first gray light of morning crept through the kitchen window. The house was still asleep. I slid the final stack of papers into a folder. On the front, I wrote 3 words with a black marker. Mercer Household Handover File. I placed it in the center of the dining table. Then I walked upstairs, packed 2 suitcases, and left the house before anyone woke up. I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave a dramatic note. I simply stopped being there. And for the first time in 12 years, the silence felt honest. The sun was barely up when I pulled onto Interstate 69. Morning traffic was light. Just a few pickup trucks heading toward Indianapolis and a couple of early commuters with travel mugs balanced in their cup holders. My Subaru still smelled faintly like the lemon cleaner I used every Sunday. 2 suitcases sat in the back. The passenger seat held the only other thing I'd taken from the house. The wedding binder. For a few miles I drove without turning on the radio, just the hum of tires on asphalt and the faint whistle of cold air leaking around the windshield. I kept expecting my phone to ring. It didn't. Not yet. The Hampton Inn in Fishers sat just off the exit beside a gas station and a Walgreens, the same beige box it had been for years. I'd actually stayed there once before during a bookkeeping conference. I parked near the side entrance. Inside, the lobby smelled like burnt coffee and fresh carpet shampoo. A young clerk with a nose ring looked up from her computer. Morning, she said, checking in. Yes, I said, one night. She typed for a moment. You're early, she said. I know. She shrugged, clearly not concerned. Room's ready. 5 minutes later, I was standing inside a standard hotel room that looked exactly like every other Hampton Inn room in America. Floral bedspread, beige curtains, a little coffee maker on the counter with 2 packets of Folgers beside it. I sat down on the edge of the bed. For a long moment, I just breathed. The room heater kicked on with a soft clunk. And then my phone buzzed. Tom? I let it ring. It buzzed again. Tom. Then Ashley. Then Tom again. I set the phone face down on the bedside table. The silence that followed felt strange, like stepping outside after years in a noisy room. Eventually, I stood up and walked over to the coffee maker. The little plastic machine sputtered and hissed while it brewed. I poured the cup and took a sip. It tasted exactly like hotel coffee always tastes. Weak, but warm. That's when the phone buzzed again. This time I picked it up, not to answer. Just to see. 6 missed calls from Tom. 3 from Ashley. 1 voicemail. I hesitated. Then pressed play. Tom's voice filled the quiet room. Diane, honey, where are you? He sounded confused more than anything. Ashley says you left early and there's this folder on the table. I heard something rustling in the background. Listen, the florist is asking about final payment and Ashley's getting upset. Can you call me back and explain what's going on? A pause. Then the line that settled something inside me. Just call me and we'll sort it out. Not are you okay? Not, I'm sorry she said that. Just sort it out. I set the phone down again. For 12 years I had been the person who sorted things out. Car insurance renewals. Mortgage payments. Ashley's parking tickets freshman year. Tom's bookkeeping when his contractor job stacked up faster than his paperwork. Nobody asked how it happened. They just assumed the machine worked. The wedding was the same story. Ashley had big ideas. Country club reception outside Indianapolis. String quartet during cocktails. Late-night slider bar. Every upgrade that made a wedding magazine photo look perfect. Tom said yes to most of it, then quietly asked me to see what we could move around in the budget. So I did. Some things I negotiated. Some things I paid up front and expected reimbursement later. A few things I covered because the alternative was watching the whole event unravel. I hadn't done it for gratitude. I did it because that's what families do. At least that's what I had believed. The phone buzzed again. Ashley this time. I ignored it. Instead, I opened the wedding binder on the desk. Inside the pages were neat and organized. Vendor contracts. Payment confirmations. Notes. But what mattered wasn't the binder. What mattered was the file I'd left behind. The handover file. Inside that folder were copies of every transaction connected to the wedding that had passed through my accounts. Every vendor I had guaranteed. Every balance still outstanding. And one short note on the front page. I knew Ashley would read it first. She always went straight for the top page. The note said, "You asked me to disappear. I have. What remains are the things that were mine to carry." Underneath that were the numbers. No drama. Just facts. Florist balance. Transportation deposit. Liquor upgrade. And the vendor contact information Ashley would now have to call herself. I closed the binder. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Tom or Ashley. It was Megan, the wedding planner. I stared at the name for a second, then answered. "Hello." Her voice sounded tight. "Diane, hi." "Morning, Megan. I just spoke with Ashley." "I imagine you did." There was a pause. "She said you left," Megan said carefully. "That's right." Another pause. "Look, I'm not calling to take sides," she said, "but there are a few things that need confirmation before this afternoon." I figured. "And," she hesitated, "I think you should know something." My stomach tightened slightly. "Know what?" Megan exhaled. "I heard Ashley say something during a vendor call last week. I didn't think much about it then." "What did she say?" Another pause. "She joked that after the honeymoon they were finally going to reset the house." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "That's the thing," Megan said quietly. "I'm not sure she meant redecorating." The room suddenly felt smaller. "Why would you think that?" "Because she said it while she was talking to a realtor." The words landed slowly. "A realtor." For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Megan said softly, "I just thought you should know." When the call ended, I sat back in the chair and stared at the binder. A realtor. I opened the wedding folder again and began flipping through papers I'd packed without really thinking about them. Halfway through the stack, I found a thin manila folder I didn't remember putting there. Tom had handed it to me a few weeks earlier. "Can you file this for later?" he'd said. At the time, I hadn't thought twice. Now I opened it. Inside was a printed home layout. Our house. Living room. Kitchen. Bedrooms. And the small office where I had spent the last 12 years managing everything. Next to that room, someone had written 2 new words in blue ink. Guest room. Underneath that, yoga space. I stared at the page. And for the first time since leaving the house, my hands began to shake. I don't know how long I sat there staring at that floor plan. The heater in the hotel room clicked on and off a few times. Somewhere down the hallway, an ice machine rattled like it was coughing up gravel. Guest room. Yoga space. The office where I had balanced the Mercer family's entire financial life for over a decade had already been repurposed in someone else's plan. Not discussed. Not even mentioned. Just reassigned. Like a storage closet after a move. I set the paper down slowly. It would have been easier if the discovery had made me furious right away. Instead, the first feeling was embarrassment. That deep, quiet embarrassment that comes when you realize everyone else understood the situation before you did. I had thought I was part of the structure. Turns out I had been temporary support beams. The phone buzzed again. Ashley. I watched it vibrate across the desk. It stopped. Then started again. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, another buzz. Tom. I sighed and picked up the phone. Not to answer. Just to listen. Tom's voicemail started mid-frustration. Diane, this is getting ridiculous. Ashley says the transportation company hasn't been paid yet, and the florist is threatening to delay delivery unless someone confirms the balance. A breath. You need to call me back. This isn't the time to do whatever this is. His tone softened slightly. We can talk about what Ashley said later, but right now we need to fix this. Fix this. That phrase again. I ended the message and set the phone down. Across the room, the little coffee maker blinked an empty red light. For years, that had been my role. When something broke financially, emotionally, logistically, I stepped in and fixed it. Quietly. Efficiently. No applause required. I stood up and walked to the window. The parking lot outside was filling with mid-morning travelers. A minivan pulling out. A man loading luggage into the back of a pickup truck. Normal people living normal days. Inside my purse, my wallet felt oddly heavy. I pulled it out and opened it. Behind my regular credit card sat the one I almost never used. The backup. I ran my thumb across the edge of it. For years, that card had been the safety net for everyone else's emergencies. Appliance repair. Unexpected tax bill. Ashley's apartment deposit. Tom's truck transmission 3 winters ago. I had always used it for the family. This morning it had paid for something different. A quiet hotel room where nobody expected me to clean up their mess. The thought brought a strange sense of relief. Not triumph. Just relief. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Megan. I answered. Diane. Yes. You might want to know what's happening over here, she said. Go ahead. There was background noise on her end, voices, someone arguing. Transportation is asking for confirmation on the final payment. The florist wants to know who's covering the balance on the upgraded arrangements. Those numbers are in the folder. I know, Megan said. Ashley found it. And she's upset. I almost laughed. That seems likely. Another pause. I'm not trying to get involved, Megan said carefully, but she said something that caught my attention. What was that? She told the caterer you'd promised to cover the remaining vendor balances as your wedding gift. The words hung there. That's not accurate, I said. I figured, Megan replied quietly. In the background, someone raised their voice. Ashley. Even through the phone, I could hear the edge of panic. Look, Megan said, lowering her voice. Right now, the biggest problem is the florist. They want confirmation in the next hour. Then Ashley should confirm it. She says she can't reach you. That sounds like a temporary inconvenience. Megan hesitated. Diane, are you planning to come to the wedding at all? The question surprised me. I looked down at the manila folder with the house layout still open on the desk. The office that had become a yoga studio in someone else's handwriting. For a moment I imagined simply driving home, walking back into the house, pretending none of this had happened. That old instinct to smooth things over stirred again. Then Ashley's voice replayed in my head. You were a great placeholder. I closed the folder. I'll be there for the reception, I said. Really? Yes. Do you want me to tell Ashley? Number. That earned a small laugh. Fair enough. When the call ended, I checked the time. 10:15 a.m. The ceremony wouldn't start until 3. Reception at 5. Plenty of time. I walked into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The mirror showed a 52-year-old woman with tired eyes and slightly crooked reading glasses. Not glamorous. Not fragile either. Just someone who had finally stopped volunteering for a job nobody respected. Back in the room, I opened my suitcase and took out the navy dress I had almost left behind. Simple. Department store clearance rack. Comfortable shoes. No drama. Then I picked up the handover file from my bag. The folder was thick but organized. Vendor lists. Payment breakdowns. Notes. Facts. That was the thing about facts. They didn't shout. They just sat there quietly until someone had to deal with them. I slid the folder back into my bag and zipped it shut. By mid-afternoon, I was back in the Subaru heading toward the country club outside Indianapolis. Traffic had picked up now. Wedding traffic. Families in suits and dresses. A few cars decorated with ribbons. The closer I got, the calmer I felt. Not angry. Not nervous. Just clear. Ashley had asked for something very specific the night before. She wanted me gone. By the time the reception started, she was going to realize exactly what that meant. The country club sat on the edge of Indianapolis, tucked behind a row of tall maples and a long curving driveway that always made events feel a little more important than they probably were. When I pulled into the parking lot, the ceremony had already ended. Guests were drifting toward the reception patio, men loosening their ties, women adjusting heels on the brick walkway, someone laughing too loudly near the bar. A string quartet was playing something soft and pleasant that floated through the warm evening air. I parked near the far edge of the lot and turned off the engine. For a moment I just sat there. My hands rested on the steering wheel. My heart wasn't racing. That surprised me. After everything I'd learned that morning, I thought I might feel angry. But anger had already burned itself out somewhere on the drive. What was left felt steadier, clearer. I stepped out of the car and smoothed the front of my navy dress. The building lights glowed warmly through tall windows. Inside, the reception room was already filling with people. I walked toward the entrance, carrying only my purse. The folder stayed inside it. A young attendant at the door smiled politely. "Good evening." "Evening," I said. He handed me a small card. "Reception's inside. Cocktail hours on the patio." I nodded and stepped inside. The ballroom looked exactly the way Ashley had imagined it. White tablecloths, soft gold centerpieces, a long gift table near the entrance covered in wrapped boxes and envelopes. For a moment I stood quietly near the door, letting the room settle around me. A few relatives noticed me. Ashley's Aunt Carol blinked in surprise. "Diane," she said. "Hi, Carol. I thought you weren't—" She stopped herself. "Well, you look nice." "Thank you." Her eyes flicked around the room like she was checking who else had seen me. Word travels fast in families. Across the room I spotted Tom. He was talking to the groom's father near the bar. Then he saw me. The confusion on his face was immediate. He excused himself and crossed the room quickly. "Diane," he said under his breath when he reached me, "what are you doing here?" "Attending the reception." That's not what Ashley said. I imagine she said a lot of things today. Tom rubbed the back of his neck. "You left without saying anything this morning." I left a folder. "Yes," he said sharply, "about that." Before he could finish, a voice cut through the room. "Dad." Ashley stood near the head table. Her wedding dress was beautiful. Lace sleeves, long train, perfect hair. For a moment I felt a small, unexpected sadness. Not for her. For the version of this day I once thought we might have. Then her eyes locked on me. The color drained from her face. She walked toward us slowly. "Why are you here?" she asked. The room around us continued buzzing with conversation, but several people nearby had already started listening. "I came for the reception," I said calmly. "You weren't supposed to." "That's true." Her eyes narrowed. "You left." "Yes." "Then why come back?" I met her gaze. "Because you asked me to disappear." She scoffed. "Exactly." And I did. Her expression flickered with irritation. "That's not what this looks like." I opened my purse and pulled out the folder. The label was visible immediately. Mercer Household Handover File. Ashley stared at it. Tom sighed. "Diane not here," he muttered. I ignored him. "I realized something this morning," I said. Ashley folded her arms. "Oh, this should be good. Last night you told me I didn't belong in your family. I told you tomorrow was about real family. That's one way to phrase it." She glanced around at the guests now openly watching. "Are you trying to make a scene?" "Number." I walked to the gift table and placed the folder beside the wrapped presents. The room grew noticeably quieter. Ashley followed me. "What is that?" "Information." Tom stepped closer. "Diane, we can talk about this at home." I turned to him. "Which home?" He frowned. "What does that mean?" I opened the folder and slid one paper out. "The house layout. The one with the office labeled guest room/yoga space." Tom's face changed instantly. Ashley saw it too. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second. Then she looked away. "Where did you get that?" Tom asked quietly. "You asked me to file it," I said. "That was just a draft." "Of what?" Tom didn't answer. Several guests were now pretending very badly not to listen. I turned back to Ashley. Your wedding is beautiful, I said. Thank you, she replied stiffly. And you're right about something. Her chin lifted. What's that? Tomorrow is about family. She waited. So I decided to stop pretending. Tom stepped closer. Diane. I raised a hand gently. Just a second. Then I looked at Ashley. You told me the best gift I could give you was disappearing. That's not what I meant. You were very clear. She flushed. This is unbelievable. No, I said quietly. This is honesty. I tapped the folder on the table. Everything in there is documentation of the things I've handled for this family for the past 12 years. Ashley rolled her eyes. Oh my God, are you seriously doing this right now? Yes. Her voice sharpened. You're trying to ruin my wedding because you're upset. I'm not upset. I leaned slightly closer so only she and Tom could hear the next words. I'm finished. She blinked. What does that even mean? It means I'm no longer managing the things you assumed I would. Her laugh came out sharp and brittle. Please, Dad will take care of it. I glanced at Tom. He looked suddenly very uncomfortable. That's the thing, I said softly. He doesn't even know where half the numbers are. Ashley's voice rose. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being transparent. She stepped forward, anger finally breaking through. You were never supposed to be more than the help anyway. The words rang louder than she expected. Conversations around the room stopped completely. For a moment, Ashley looked shocked at her own voice. Then she doubled down. You married my dad for convenience, not family. Tom grabbed her arm. Ashley, enough. But it was too late. I watched her carefully. And then I said the one sentence I had practiced during the drive. I didn't disappear, Tom, I said quietly. I just stopped subsidizing your lies. The silence that followed was absolute. I closed the folder and left it sitting on the gift table. That, I said calmly, is my wedding gift. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. No one tried to stop me. By the time I reached the lobby doors, I could feel the air outside pulling at the room behind me. Silence travels strangely through a crowd. It doesn't explode, it spreads. Like people suddenly realizing they're standing in the middle of something real. I pushed the door open and stepped onto the patio. The string quartet was still playing, a slow instrumental version of something that might have been a pop song 20 years ago. A waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses paused as I passed. Inside the ballroom, voices started rising again. Low at first, then sharper. I didn't stop walking. The brick patio stretched toward the parking lot lined with cocktail tables and small lanterns. A few guests outside looked up as I came through. One older couple whispered to each other. Someone inside the ballroom said Ashley's name loudly. Then another voice answered. I reached the edge of the patio just as the doors behind me opened again. Diana. Tom's voice. I turned slowly. He walked toward me. Ty already loosened his face, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. What the hell was that, he asked under his breath. I told the truth. You blindsided us. I left the folder 12 hours ago. That wasn't meant to become a public scene. I folded my arms. It didn't have to. He ran a hand through his hair. You know, Ashley's emotional right now. Weddings are stressful. Stress doesn't make people say those things, Tom. He looked away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. From inside the ballroom, we could hear raised voices again. Ashley's voice carried clearly this time. I don't care what she wrote in that stupid folder. A woman's voice answered Evan's mother, I guessed. Well, someone has to care if vendors are asking questions. Tom exhaled slowly. This is exactly what I didn't want today. You didn't want honesty. I didn't want conflict. That was the most honest thing he'd said all day. I studied his face. The same face I had looked across the dinner table from for 12 years. A good man in many ways. But a man who believed avoiding problems was the same as solving them. Tom, I said quietly, did you plan to tell me about the realtor? His eyes flicked up. Who told you that? That's not an answer. He shifted his weight. We were just exploring options. For when? After the wedding. And where was I supposed to go? You're jumping to conclusions. I nodded slowly. Am I? He didn't respond. Behind him, the patio door opened again. Ashley stepped outside. Her makeup was still perfect, but the tightness around her mouth told the rest of the story. Several guests lingered inside the doorway pretending to check their phones. Ashley walked straight toward us. "You are unbelievable," she said to me. "Good evening, Ashley." Don't start with that calm voice like you're the reasonable one here. I'm simply talking. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You embarrassed yourself. Her jaw tightened. You twisted everything. I documented it. She laughed harshly. You really think people care about spreadsheets right now? No, I said. But they care about honesty. Honesty, she snapped. You've been playing martyr in that house for years. Tom stepped in. Ashley, let's just... No, she said, jerking her arm away. Her voice was louder now. Everyone thinks she's some kind of saint because she pays a few bills and acts helpful. I tilted my head slightly. A few... Her eyes flashed. You wanted to be needed, that's why you did all of it. That may be partly true, I said. She blinked, thrown by the agreement. But wanting to help and being treated like staff are two different things. She crossed her arms. You chose that role. No, I said. You assigned it. For a moment we simply looked at each other. The late afternoon sun dipped lower behind the trees, casting long shadows across the patio. Ashley shook her head. You should have just stayed gone. Probably. Then why didn't you... I thought about that question. About the drive. About the folder. About the moment I saw my office labeled as a yoga room. Then I answered. Because disappearing quietly would have left the same lie in place. She frowned. What lie? That I was never carrying anything important. Her expression hardened. You weren't. I nodded. Then the next few weeks will prove that. Tom sighed. This isn't helping anyone. No, I said gently. But it might stop the pattern. Ashley scoffed. You're acting like this is some grand lesson. It's not. Then what is it? I met her eyes one last time. It's the end of my participation. For a second she looked confused, then annoyed. Fine, she said. Good, go. I gave a small nod. That was always the plan. I turned and walked toward the parking lot. Behind me, the patio door opened again as someone from inside called Ashley back. Music resumed faintly from the reception hall. Laughter returned in short bursts as guests tried to pretend the evening hadn't shifted. But the truth has a way of lingering in rooms long after the conversation moves on. I reached my car and opened the door. Before getting in, I looked back once. Through the tall ballroom windows, I could see the gift table. The folder sat right in the middle. Unwrapped. Unavoidable. For 12 years, I had been the person making sure everything ran smoothly. Tonight was the first time I had allowed the system to run without me. I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. And for the first time in a long while, I drove away from the Mercer family without feeling responsible for what happened next. The first night after the wedding reception, I slept in Bonnie's guest room in Terre Haute. It wasn't fancy. Just a small room with a quilt she'd had since the 80s, and a window that looked out over her backyard. There was a wind chime hanging from the maple tree that knocked softly against itself whenever the breeze picked up. I hadn't slept that well in years. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because for the first time in a long time, there was nothing waiting for me the next morning that involved fixing someone else's problem. When I woke up, sunlight was already spilling across the floor. Bonnie was in the kitchen making toast. She glanced up when I walked in. Well, she said, sliding a mug of coffee across the counter, did you topple the Mercer Empire? I sat down and wrapped my hands around the mug. Not exactly. She raised an eyebrow. Reception. Awkward. Good, she said with satisfaction. I laughed a little. That was the first time I'd laughed in a couple of days. The following weeks were quieter than I expected. Tom called several times that first week. The first message sounded irritated. Diane, we need to talk about what happened. The second sounded tired. Ashley's upset. I think things got blown out of proportion. The third message was softer. I didn't realize you felt that way. I listened to them all. I didn't answer right away. Eventually, I sent one short reply. The numbers are settled, the rest isn't. That was all I had to say. Ashley didn't contact me for almost 3 weeks. Then one afternoon my phone buzzed while I was sitting on Bonnie's porch. A single text. I didn't mean it like that. I read it once. Then I set the phone down and watched the wind move through the trees. Some sentences come too late to fix anything. I didn't respond. Instead, I started rebuilding my own routine. I rented a small apartment in Noblesville, about 30 minutes north of Indianapolis. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom. Small kitchen. But it had a little porch with a swing that didn't creak, and every morning the sun came through the window just right while the coffee brewed. The first Saturday I moved in, I drove to the grocery store and realized something odd. No one was texting me about bills. No one was asking where a document was. No one needed a last-minute problem solved before Monday. The silence felt strange at first. Then it started to feel peaceful. I picked up more bookkeeping clients. Local contractors mostly. The kind of steady work that keeps life simple. A few relatives reached out quietly over time. Ashley's Aunt Carol sent a short message. I'm sorry for how things went down. Evan's father shook my hand once when I ran into him at a hardware store. Didn't know the full story, he said. People notice more than families like to believe. One evening about 2 months later, Tom finally came to see me. He stood on the small porch outside my apartment, looking older than I remembered. We talked for about 20 minutes. No yelling. No dramatic speeches. Just quiet honesty. I should have said something that night, he admitted. Yes, I said. I didn't want to make things worse. That's the problem, I replied gently. Silence usually does. He nodded slowly. I don't know how to fix this. I looked out across the parking lot where a couple kids were riding bikes between the buildings. Some things don't get fixed, I said. They just get understood. When he left, I didn't feel angry. Just finished. Life has a strange way of resetting itself when you finally step out of a role that never really belonged to you. For years, I believed belonging meant staying useful. Keeping the peace. Making sure everyone else's life stayed comfortable. Turns out belonging has a lot more to do with respect. And sometimes the only way to find that respect is to stop carrying the weight people quietly placed on your shoulders. Ashley asked me to disappear. I didn't. I simply stepped out of the version of the story where I was invisible. And once I did that, the rest of the truth had room to breathe. If you've ever been the person holding everything together while nobody noticed, then you probably understand this feeling. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is set the load down and walk away. If this story reminded you of someone or maybe even of yourself, feel free to share it. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, you're always welcome here.